The fluorescent lights hum above her like a swarm of dying insects, casting everything in that particular shade of institutional pale that makes healthy skin look sick and sick skin look dead. She counts the ceiling tiles for the 4th time. 52. Still 52. Her hands rest on her stomach, flat as ever at 6 weeks, betraying nothing of the chaos multiplying inside her. The waiting room smells of antiseptic and fear, that sharp chemical bite barely masking something more human underneath. She is Vivian Cole, 27 years old, $623 in her checking account, $4,800 drowning in credit card debt, and she is here to make the only sensible decision available to a woman who can't afford her own life, let alone another. The plastic chair creaks when she shifts her weight. Around her, other women wait in their own private silences, each of them islands in an archipelago of difficult choices. None of them make eye contact. That is the unspoken rule of places like this. She thinks of the stranger from her sister's wedding at the Crane estate, the one with eyes like steel storms and hands that knew exactly where to touch. She thinks of champagne bubbles and bad decisions, and the way he whispered her name like it meant something. She thinks of waking up alone in that hotel room, the sheets still warm where he had been. She does not think of his face. She can't afford to. Vivian Cole. The nurse's voice cuts through her spiral, and she stands on legs that feel borrowed from someone else. The examination room is smaller than she expected, the ultrasound machine squatting in the corner like a mechanical prophet waiting to deliver its verdict. She lies back on the paper-covered table, stares at the ceiling, different tiles now, while cold gel spreads across her abdomen. The technician moves the wand with practiced efficiency, her face professionally blank, and then it changes. Her expression shifts into something Vivian can't read, something that makes her blood run cold before the woman even speaks. She excuses herself, returns with a doctor. The doctor looks at the screen, looks at Vivian, looks at the screen again. "Miss Cole," she says, and her voice carries the weight of worlds ending. "You are carrying triplets." The word does not make sense. Vivian hears it, but her brain refuses to process the sound into meaning. 3 separate heartbeats flutter on the monitor, 3 tiny pulses of life where she expected one manageable problem. The room tilts. She grips the edges of the table as mathematics crashes through her mind. 3 cribs, 3 car seats, 3 college funds she will never afford. The impossibility of it threatens to swallow her whole. And then the door crashes open. Men in black suits pour into the corridor outside, their voices sharp and commanding. She hears screaming from the waiting room, the clatter of chairs overturning, her name shouted like a weapon. The doctor's face goes white. Vivian is moving before conscious thought catches up, sliding off the table, gel still wet on her skin, ducking through a side door into a supply closet that smells of gauze and iodine. Through the crack in the door, she sees them searching, methodical and relentless, and she hears one word repeated like a curse. Ashford. The name means nothing. The name means everything. The name is the beginning of the end of the life she knew. If this story satisfies your soul, smash that like button and share it with someone who needs a good escape. And hey, subscribe to the channel so you never miss what happens next. The supply room window was smaller than she remembered. A dirty pane of glass, a cramped rectangle, groaned in protest as Vivian forced it open. She climbed through anyway, her hip scraping the metal frame, and tumbled into an alley that reeked of rotting garbage and despair. Her shoes hit the concrete and she ran. She did not think about the 3 heartbeats inside her, or the men in black suits with intentions even darker. She thought only of distance, of escape, of the 2 blocks between her and the bus stop, where she could disappear into the anonymous crush of city traffic. The ultrasound gel was still cold and wet on her belly, seeping through her thin shirt like a quiet reminder of what had just happened in that examination room. 3 children, 3 lives growing where she had expected only a problem that could be solved. She made it 1.5 blocks. The black car appeared like a predator sliding out of shadow, gliding across the intersection to cut her off with the silent certainty of something that had done this many times. Vivian pivoted to run another way, but there was another car, and men were stepping out of both vehicles with the calm, efficient precision of professionals who knew their prey had nowhere left to go. The first man to approach her was tall and broad-shouldered, with a face that might have been handsome if it had ever learned how to smile. "Miss Cole," he said, and his voice was polite in a way that felt frightening. "I am Marcus Webb. You will come with us." It was not a question. Vivian considered screaming, but his hand was already on her elbow, guiding her toward the car with a pressure that promised to become pain if she resisted. The interior was upholstered in luxury leather, carrying the scent of money and threat. Vivian tried to memorize the route, counting turns, listening for horns and the city's constant noise to keep her bearings. Then a black cloth was placed over her eyes, and the world vanished. She sat in darkness, feeling every movement of the car. Left, right. A surge of speed on the highway, slowing, gravel grinding beneath the tires. The sound of an iron gate opening, then closing behind them like the jaws of some enormous beast. When the blindfold was removed, Vivian had to blink several times before the scene came into focus. The mansion in front of her did not belong to this century. Gray stone walls, tall windows framed in dark wood, a black tiled roof that seemed to swallow the last light of afternoon, a perfectly trimmed lawn stretched in every direction, green to the point of looking unreal. A marble fountain stood at the center of the circular drive, water murmuring as if there were nothing strange at all about a woman being kidnapped in broad daylight. Vivian counted windows, 23 across the front, 23 pairs of eyes that could be watching her. She counted cars, 4 black vehicles parked neatly along the left wing. She counted guards, 3 at the gate, 2 at the front door, probably more she could not see. Every number was a barrier between her and freedom. Every number tightened her chest a little more. Marcus led her up the stone steps, through an oak door twice her height. The hallway inside swallowed sound. Marble beneath her feet, crystal chandeliers overhead, oil paintings on the walls that Vivian suspected were worth more than her life. The air was cool and heavy with the smell of old money, the kind of scent families carry when they have been wealthy for so many generations they forget what poverty even is. They passed rooms she glimpsed only in fragments. A sitting room with red velvet sofas, a dining room with a table long enough for 20 people, a spiral staircase rising to the upper floor like the spine of a monster. At last they stopped before a set of double doors made of dark wood. Marcus knocked twice, short and crisp. A voice answered from inside. "Come in." That voice. Vivian knew that voice. She had heard it whisper her name in the darkness of a hotel room, had heard it moan against her ear, had heard it say goodbye, the goodbye she thought would last forever. Marcus opened the doors and looked at her with something close to pity. "He is waiting for you." And the way he said, he made Vivian understand that the man she was about to meet was not only the father of the children in her belly, he was something far more dangerous than that. The office swallowed her the way a beast closes its jaws. Dark oak paneling the color of dried blood, bookcases rising to the ceiling and packed with leather-bound volumes Vivian doubted anyone had ever read, and the light from the broad window behind him, spilling forward to form a kind of halo around the silhouette of the man seated at the desk. He was there. The man from her sister's wedding, the man with eyes like a steel storm, and hands that knew exactly where to touch. The man who had whispered her name as if it meant something. But this was not him. The man that night had laughed easily, touched gently, murmured poetry into her ear in a hotel room gilded with champagne bubbles and possibility. The man in front of her now looked carved from ice and power. The steel storm eyes held none of the warmth that had once melted her. They were cold, calculating, and dangerous in a way that made Vivian's survival instinct scream a warning. Dominic Ashford. The name fit him now in a way the charming man from that night never could. He did not stand when she entered. He did not offer her a seat. He only watched her with the look of someone appraising a newly purchased object. The silence stretched long enough for Vivian to hear her own heartbeat thudding in her ears. At last he spoke. "I know everything." His voice was low and smooth, like velvet laid over steel. "About the pregnancy. About the 3 children. About what you plan to do today." Vivian felt the blood drain from her face. "How could you know that?" He did not answer her question. Instead, he rose and came around the desk with the controlled grace of something dangerous, stopping close enough that she could smell his cologne and remember exactly how it had pressed against her skin. Vivian stepped back on instinct. He noticed, and a flicker of a smile touched the corner of his mouth, the smile of a predator who knows the prey is already in the trap. "Do you know who I am?" She did not answer, but her silence told him enough. "Dominic Ashford. Not just the businessman you met at the wedding." He spoke as if he were reading his own biography. "The Ashford Empire controls half the East Coast, underground finance, real estate, and other operations you do not need to know in detail." Vivian swallowed. Other operations. She understood what that meant. The Mafia. She had slept with a Mafia boss. She was carrying the children of a Mafia boss. 3 children. "This is my body." She heard her own voice, surprised that it did not shake. "My decision. My life. You have no right to me." Dominic tilted his head, studying her as if she were an interesting problem to be solved. Then he walked to the window and looked out over the vivid green lawn with the posture of a man who owned everything his eyes could reach. "These children are Ashford heirs." His voice was no longer velvet. It was steel, my blood, my line. "They will be born. They will be protected. And you will stay here until that happens." The room seemed to shrink around Vivian. She thought of her small apartment with its leaking faucet and thin walls. She thought of her job moving other people's numbers for a paycheck that barely carried her from one day to the next. She thought of the life she had been struggling just to survive. And now she thought of 3 cribs she could never afford turning into a golden cage she could not escape. "If I refuse?" she asked, even though she already knew the answer. Dominic turned and looked at her. His smile was beautiful and terrible at the same time, the smile of a wolf baring its teeth at its prey. "You will not refuse," he said simply. And in his eyes, Vivian saw the death of every choice she had thought she still possessed. There was no threat in his voice. There did not need to be. The truth was clear enough. She was on his territory, surrounded by his people, carrying inside her the thing he wanted. She had no money, no power, no one to call. $623 and $4,800 of debt could not buy a ticket out of this place. Dominic returned to the desk and pressed a button on the phone. "Marcus, take Miss Cole to her room. Make sure she has everything she needs." A room, not a cell. But Vivian knew the difference was only semantics. The door opened and Marcus appeared as if he had been waiting just outside the whole time. Maybe he had. Vivian looked back at Dominic one last time before she left. He had already settled into his chair again, eyes fixed on the laptop screen as if she no longer existed, as if the conversation they had just had were only a small item on his to-do list, now checked off and finished. She had become the prisoner of a man she once believed was only one mistake of a night, and the 3 heartbeats in her belly were the chains. The room they brought her to was larger than every apartment she had ever rented in Boston put together. A king-size bed dressed in ivory silk sheets claimed the center like the throne of a captive queen. Deep red velvet curtains hung from ceiling to floor, heavy with luxury, hiding tall windows that Vivian knew would be the first thing she checked. A Persian rug lay so thick it swallowed the sound of footsteps. A small crystal chandelier cast a warm glow over a dressing table of rosewood, its mirror framed in gold. The private bathroom was lined with white marble, with a tub large enough for 3 people. Everything was breathtakingly beautiful and bone-chillingly cold. A golden cage. It was the only phrase Vivian could think of. Marcus stood in the doorway, watching her take it all in. "If you need anything," he said in a flat voice with no emotion at all, "someone will be stationed outside 24 hours a day, 7 days a week." Then he closed the door. Vivian waited until his footsteps faded before she moved. She was not the type to accept fate. Not after 11 years of scraping by since her aunt had thrown her out with nothing but the clothes on her back. Not after all the late shifts, the skipped meals, the coins saved one by one just to stay alive. She would not become anyone's prisoner, not even a mafia boss with steel storm eyes and a wolf's smile. Vivian began to search, methodical and thorough. The vanity drawers, empty except for a few basic toiletries, the closet, packed with expensive clothes in her exact size, but nothing useful. She looked for a phone. There was none. She looked for a laptop. None. Anything that could connect her to the outside world. Nothing at all. She turned to the windows. There were 3, each tall and narrow with heavy wooden frames. The first was locked. The second was 2. The third had a small gap at the top corner, enough for air to slip through but not enough for an adult to squeeze out. Vivian stared at that opening, and an idea began to form. She found paper and a pen in the bedside drawer. Maybe they left it there for her to write a journal, to do something to kill time. She wrote quickly, her name, her old apartment address. Kidnapped. Need help. Call the police. She rolled the paper into a tight little tube, climbed onto the window ledge, and tossed it through the gap. It fluttered down onto the lawn below like a desperate white moth. Vivian did not know if anyone would find it. She did not know if anyone ever passed through this vast property. But at least she had done something. At least she had not surrendered. 2 hours later, the bedroom door opened without a knock. Dominic walked in, and in his hand was the paper she had thrown. It was still rolled up, still intact exactly as it had been when she let it go. Vivian felt her blood turn to ice in her veins. He did not speak. He only stood there, unrolled the paper, and read every word with an unreadable expression. Then he looked up, and there was something in his eyes that made her want to step back, but her legs refused to move. "Who did you think would get this message?" His voice was gentle in a way that was dangerous. "The police? They work for me. At least the ones who matter. Your neighbors?" "There are no neighbors within 5 miles. The gardener found it within 10 minutes. He stepped closer, and Vivian found herself retreating until her back neared the wall. "I could lock you in this room and throw away the key," he said, each word dropping like stone. I could cut off every contact you have with the outside world. I could turn you into a ghost no one ever knew existed." He stopped one step away, close enough that she could feel the heat of his body, close enough to remember how this body had held her that night. "But I do not want to do that." His voice lowered into a whisper. "Do not make me change my mind, Vivian." Then he turned and left, taking the paper with him like evidence of her foolishness. The door closed. Vivian stood there with her back against the wall, shaking from head to toe. But not from fear, from anger. She had underestimated him. She had thought she could slip past his system with a scrap of paper and a little hope. A mistake. She would not make it again. Next time she would be smarter. Next time she would be more patient. Next time she would find a way. But she did not know that in this mansion, there was someone else watching her from the shadows. Someone even more dangerous than Dominic Ashford. And that someone was smiling. 3 days passed in suffocating monotony. Vivian measured time by the meals that were delivered, by the way the light shifted behind the velvet curtains, by the sound of a guard's footsteps pacing back and forth in the hallway. She had not seen Dominic since the night he held her crumpled plea for help and crushed her hope with a few cold sentences. Maybe he was busy running his empire. Maybe he was waiting for her to learn her lesson. Whatever the reason, his absence did not make her feel any safer. It only made her realize how completely isolated she was. Then, on the morning of the 4th day, there came a gentle knock at the door, not the brisk knock of a servant with a tray, or Marcus coming to check on her. This knock had a different rhythm, kinder, as if the person on the other side actually cared whether she wanted to open up or not. Vivian opened the door and found a woman she had never met. She looked about 32, with glossy brown hair falling to her shoulders and eyes the same storm gray as Dominic's, only far warmer. Her face was beautiful in a classic way, high cheekbones and full lips, but without the cold distance Vivian had come to expect in this house. The smile she brought with her carried a sincerity Vivian had been starving for. "Hello, I am Serena, Dominic's sister." Her voice was gentle, with a touch of self-mocking humor. Or, as he likes to call me, the thorn in his side. Vivian did not know how to respond. She stood there with one hand still on the edge of the door, ready to slam it shut if she had to. But Serena did not seem threatening. She tilted her head, studying Vivian with sympathetic eyes. "I heard my brother invited you here." She put emphasis on invited, with a faint, bitter irony. "And knowing Dominic, I am sure he did it in the worst way possible. He does not know how to treat women. He never has." Vivian stayed silent, but she felt some of her guard loosen. Serena sighed and leaned against the doorframe, relaxed as if they were old friends. "I know how you feel. Trapped in here. No one to talk to. No one on your side." She looked straight into Vivian's eyes. "But you have me now. If you need anything, tell me. All right?" Vivian wanted to believe her. God, she wanted to believe her. After 4 days alone in this golden cage, after Dominic's cold control and Marcus's blank efficiency, someone who seemed to care about her feelings felt like cool water in a desert. She nodded slowly, and Serena's smile brightened. "Wonderful. Now, would you like to take a walk? The gardens are beautiful, and you need fresh air for the babies." They walked through the gardens behind the mansion, places Vivian had not been allowed to step into before. Roses bloomed in thick, overflowing bushes, in colors that ranged from deep crimson to pure white. A small fountain trickled softly between neatly trimmed hedges. Serena talked about her childhood in this house, about a strict father who had died, about a mother she did not mention much at all. She asked Vivian about her life before, about her job, about her family, and Vivian found herself answering, offering up small pieces of her life she had not meant to give to anyone inside these walls. They stopped beside a stone bench under the shade of a maple tree when Serena's phone vibrated. She glanced at the screen, and her expression shifted for the briefest instant, too fast for Vivian to be certain she had really seen it. "Excuse me for a moment," Serena said, and stepped a few yards away to take the call. Vivian sat on the bench, her gaze following butterflies drifting over a patch of lavender, but her attention fixed on Serena's voice. Mostly it was murmured yeses and ums without meaning. Then the wind shifted, and Vivian caught a fragment of a sentence. "She trusts me now." Serena's voice was low, a whisper, but clear, according to plan. Vivian's heart slammed once, then seemed to stop. She kept her face calm, kept watching the butterflies as if she had heard nothing. Serena returned with the same sweet smile as before, not a trace of the call left on her face. "Sorry, work. You know, even if I do not work in the Empire the way Dominic does, I stay busy." Vivian smiled back, hoping it looked natural. "It is fine." They walked for 10 more minutes before Serena brought her back to her room. All the way back, Vivian wondered if she had misheard. Maybe Serena had been talking about something else. Maybe she had said she, and she was not Vivian. Maybe it was all a foolish coincidence. But deep down, Vivian knew she had not misheard. And she also knew that in this house, she had no one she could trust. Not Dominic with his cold control. Not Serena with her warm smile and her mysterious call. She was completely alone. That night, Vivian lay awake on the silk bed, eyes wide open in the dark, staring at the ceiling. She heard footsteps outside her door. Slow, careful. Then they stopped. Right in front of her door. Silence stretched for 1 breath, 2 breaths, 3 breaths. As if someone was standing there listening. Waiting. Watching through the crack beneath the door. Then the footsteps moved away, dissolving into the darkness of the long hallway. Vivian clenched her hands in the sheets, her heart pounding like a war drum. She did not know who it was. A guard doing his rounds, or a watcher with private intentions. In this house, the line between the two was terrifyingly thin. Morning sickness woke her at 3 a.m. Vivian barely had time to roll out of bed and rush into the bathroom before her stomach heaved up everything inside her. She knelt on the icy marble floor, clinging to the toilet, her whole body shaking as each spasm tore at her throat. 3 heartbeats inside her were demanding, reshaping her body in ways she could not control. Tears slid down her cheeks, not from pain, but from exhaustion, from loneliness, from the helplessness of a pregnant woman stranded in enemy territory with no one to lean on. She did not hear the door open. She did not hear footsteps cross the bedroom floor. She only realized someone else was there when a cold cloth was laid against the back of her neck and a large hand gently gathered her hair away from her face. Vivian lifted her head and saw Dominic sitting on the floor beside her. He was still in dress pants and a button-down shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, as if he had just stepped away from his desk. In the pale yellow bathroom light, she could see the dark circles beneath his eyes, the tight cords in his neck, the fatigue he hid in daylight behind his mask of power. He did not speak. He only stayed there, one hand keeping the cold cloth at her neck, the other offering her a glass of water. Vivian drank in small sips, feeling the nausea ease little by little. Silence held between them, but it was not the tense silence of that first day in his office. This was the silence of 3 a.m, when every barrier thins and people become more real with each other. For the first time since she had been brought here, Vivian saw him not as the Mafia boss with the wolf's smile and the cold threats, just a tired man at 3 a.m, sitting on a bathroom floor beside the woman carrying his children. At last Dominic spoke, his voice lower and rougher than usual. "You need to know something." Vivian looked at him and waited. "Someone is watching you." She almost laughed. "Your people," she replied, the sarcasm sharp. "I know. They stand outside my door 24 hours a day." "No." Dominic shook his head, and something in his eyes made Vivian's smile die on her lips. "Someone else. I do not know who they are yet." He stood, walked to the sink, and stared into the mirror with the expression of a man deciding how much to say. Since the news of the pregnancy got out, there have been forces that want to control the Ashford heirs. This empire has many enemies, Vivian, and some of those enemies are willing to do anything to get leverage over me. Vivian felt the blood in her veins turn colder. She placed a hand over her belly, where 3 small lives were growing, unaware they had become targets before they were even fully formed. She was not only Dominic's prisoner, she was prey in an underworld that was already circling, and Dominic, though she hated to admit it, might be the only thing standing between her and danger. "Who?" she asked, her voice trembling despite the effort to steady it. "Who wants to hurt me?" Dominic turned to look at her, and for the first time, Vivian saw something like fear in those steel storm eyes. Not fear for himself, fear for something he could not completely control. "It could be anyone," he said slowly, each word heavy as stone. "It could be the one you least suspect." He left the bathroom, crossed the bedroom, and paused at the door. The hallway light formed a halo around his outline, turning him into a dark figure she could not read. "Lock the door when I leave," he said, "and do not open it for anyone who is not me or Marcus." Then he vanished into the corridor's darkness, leaving Vivian alone with his warning echoing in her head. She rose on unsteady legs, went to the door, and turned the lock. The small click sounded in the night's hush, like a reminder that even the thickest walls could not protect her from an enemy already inside. Vivian understood a terrifying truth. In this house, the enemy could be sleeping in the room next door, and she thought of Serena's sweet smile, of the mysterious call in the garden, of the words "she trusts me now," that Vivian had tried to convince herself she had imagined. A week had passed since that 3 a.m. night in the bathroom. Vivian did not see Dominic again, but she noticed small changes in the way she was treated. The range of where she was allowed to go had widened. She could walk in the garden without Serena at her side, though there was always a dark shadow following at a distance that was just close enough. And today, Mrs. Brennan, the elderly housekeeper with kind eyes, informed her that she was permitted to use the library. The library of the Ashford estate was a room that could make any scholar weep. Bookcases rose from floor to ceiling and covered 3 walls, packed tight with leather-bound volumes stamped in gold along their spines. A spiral staircase of oak led up to the 2nd level of the library, where thousands more books waited. Late afternoon light slipped through stained glass windows, casting rainbow bands that danced across the carpet. The smell of old paper and tanned leather filled the air like a whisper from the past. Vivian meant to choose a book and find a quiet corner to read, when she realized she was not alone. Dominic sat in a leather armchair near the fireplace, a glass of amber liquor in his hand, his eyes fixed on nothing. He was not reading, not working, not doing anything at all. He only sat there like a carved statue with darkness in his gaze. Vivian took a step back, intending to leave before he noticed her presence. But his voice cut through that intention. "Stay." She froze, not knowing whether it was an order or an invitation. Dominic still did not look at her, his eyes on the flames that leapt in the hearth even though the air was not cold. "Do you want to know why I am like this?" The question came so suddenly Vivian did not know how to answer. She stood there between towering shelves, watching the man who had imprisoned her ask something she never expected him to ask. "Like what?" she finally said. "Cold, controlling, trusting no one." Dominic lifted the glass to his mouth and took a long drink. "My mother left when I was 7, he said, his voice level, as if he were reciting someone else's story. "She said she would come back, said she was leaving for only 1 week. Then 1 week became 1 month. 1 month became 1 year. I waited for her at the window every day for 1 year. Every afternoon when a car passed through the gate, I thought it was her. Every time the phone rang, I ran to it hoping to hear her voice." He laughed, a bitter sound with no joy in it. "She never came back. And my father, he raised me to be an heir, but he did not know how to raise me to be a person. He taught me about power, about control, about never letting anyone see weakness, but he never taught me about love." Vivian did not know what pushed her, but she found herself moving closer, lowering herself into the chair across from him. Maybe it was because she recognized something familiar in his story. Maybe it was because she was too tired of being alone. "My parents died when I was 16, she said, not knowing why she was sharing this. "A car accident. I went to live with my aunt, but she threw me out when I was 18, said I was a burden. My sister married rich and forgot I existed." She looked down at her hands resting on her belly. "I have been scraping by since then. Alone. Always alone." Silence stretched between them, but it was no longer as heavy as before. This was the silence of 2 abandoned children looking at each other, recognizing that the other person's wound matched their own. Not love, Vivian knew that, but recognition, an understanding that she was not alone in her pain, even if the one who understood her was the man who held her captive. "Your mother," she asked after a long while. "Where is she now?" Dominic did not answer right away. He stared into the fire, his jaw clenched, and Vivian saw the muscles in his neck tighten. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold as winter. "She is still alive, and that is the problem." He did not explain further. He did not say where she was, what she was doing, why the fact that she was alive was a problem. But the way he said it, the way those steel storm eyes darkened like a sky before a breaking storm, made Vivian understand. The ghost from Dominic's past was still out there somewhere, watching, waiting, and perhaps it was she, the danger he had warned about that night in the bathroom. The one you least suspect. Not Serena, but the woman who abandoned her 7-year-old son and vanished for 29 years. 2 days after the conversation in the library, Serena appeared at Vivian's door with that familiar smile and an invitation to take a walk. "Fresh air is good for the baby," she said, lifting a hand to sweep her glossy brown hair behind her ear. 3 babies, in your case. You need to get outside more instead of hiding in your room like this." Vivian wanted to refuse. Ever since she had caught that fragment of a phone call in the garden that day, she had tried to keep her distance from Serena. But Serena showed up too often, too friendly, and refusing would only invite suspicion. So Vivian nodded, pulled on a thin cardigan, and followed Serena down the stairs. She noticed Marcus was not standing in his usual place. Serena caught the direction of her glance and explained, "Marcus is tied up with Dominic. Something at the port needs urgent handling. But do not worry, our garden is safe." They passed through the glass doors into the back garden. The afternoon was bright and pleasant. golden light bathing the rose bushes in full bloom. Vivian drew in the clean air and felt the 3 small lives inside her, growing day by day. 11 weeks now. She had been here nearly 5 weeks, and her belly had begun to rise, a gentle curve that announced an irreversible change. Serena led her deeper into the grounds, past the roses, past the fountain, toward a narrow path Vivian had never explored. The trees on either side grew thicker, shutting off the view from the mansion. A faint unease began to crawl up Vivian's spine. "Where are we going?" she asked, slowing her steps. "I want to show you my mother's secret garden," Serena replied, still walking steadily ahead. She planted it before she left. "It is beautiful." They rounded a bend and Vivian stopped cold. A black SUV sat parked ahead on the path, its engine running, and 2 men in black suits waited beside it. Not Dominic's men. Vivian knew the guards on this estate, and these 2 were not among them. She turned to run, but Serena had already stepped behind her, blocking the way. And on the face that had seemed so warm, a completely different smile had taken its place, cold, calculating, triumphant. "Do not make a sound," Serena said softly, as if commenting on the weather. "No one will hear you. And if you scream, I can't guarantee these men will be gentle." Vivian felt the world give way beneath her. She trusts me now. According to plan, the broken pieces of what she had overheard in the garden that day slid together into one terrifying picture. "Why?" Vivian asked, her voice shaking. Serena moved closer, gray eyes like Dominic's but lit with no warmth at all, only bitterness stored up for years. "Why?" "Because my brother always gets everything. Our father's love, even though I was his child too. The empire, even though I have a right to inherit. And now, the next generation of heirs." She looked down at Vivian's belly with a hatred that seemed to breathe. 3 children. 3 Ashford heirs. And what about me? The daughter no one wanted, no one saw, no one cared about. One of the men stepped in and grabbed Vivian's arm. She flinched and tried to pull away, but his grip was a steel clamp. She could fight, she could claw, she could kick and bite, but the 3 heartbeats inside her stopped her. Any violent movement could put them in danger. The second man stuffed a cloth into her mouth and sealed it with tape. Her hands were forced behind her back and tied with hard plastic that bit into her skin. They shoved her into the SUV the way you shove a sack of cargo. Serena climbed into the front seat, then looked back at Vivian with a satisfied smile. "Moretti is paying very well for you and those children," she said, speaking a name Vivian had heard Dominic say with unmistakable hatred. The Moretti family, the Ashfords' sworn enemies. The danger, it turned out, had not come from outside. It had been inside this house from the beginning. The vehicle pulled away, shooting out through a side gate of the estate. Through the window, Vivian watched the house fall back, watched the garden vanish behind rows of trees. She thought of the golden cage room she had hated. She thought of the office with its dark oak and the man with the wolf's smile. She thought of 3 in the morning on the bathroom floor, and the conversation in the library. And what frightened her most was not the kidnapping itself. It was the fact that the first person she thought of, the person she found herself hoping would save her, was the very man who had imprisoned her. Dominic Ashford. Her captor had become her only hope. The irony tasted bitter. The SUV plunged into the darkness of the road leading away from the city. Serena looked back at her one more time. "Do not worry, you will not die," she said, in a tone that might have been comforting if it had not been so cruel. "You are only merchandise, a trade for what Moretti wants. After they get what they need from Dominic, who knows? Maybe they will keep you as a breeding machine. Ashford heirs in Moretti hands. Just imagine how wonderful that would be." Vivian closed her eyes and fought the tears back. 3 heartbeats pulsed in her belly, small and fragile and utterly dependent on her to survive. She could not cry. She could not be afraid. She had to be strong. And she prayed. To whom? She did not know. Maybe to any force that might be listening. She prayed that Dominic would realize she was missing, that he would find her, that he would reach her in time, before it was too late. Dominic was sitting in his office, reviewing financial reports, when Marcus walked in without knocking. In 15 years of working together, Marcus had never entered without knocking. That was the first sign that something was very wrong. Dominic looked up and saw that Marcus's usually unreadable face had gone pale as a corpse. "Miss Cole?" Marcus said, his voice raw and hoarse. "She is gone. And Miss Serena has disappeared as well." Silence. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Time froze in the dark oak room. Then Dominic stood, and the custom Italian walnut desk, worth more than a house, shattered beneath his fist. The desk top split. The laptop flew to the floor, Papers erupted into the air like snow in a storm. Dominic's hand bled where splinters of wood lodged under the skin, but he did not feel it. He felt nothing but the rage burning through every reasonable thought in his mind. Marcus took 2 steps back. 15 years. 15 years standing beside Dominic Ashford through underground wars, bloody purges, nights when death waited at every corner. He had never seen Dominic lose control. Not once. Until today. "Find her," Dominic said, and his voice was no longer human. It was the roar of a beast, the sound of a storm about to swallow everything in its path. At any cost. Burn the city if you have to. And in that moment, in the wreckage, with blood dripping from his hand onto the Persian rug, Dominic understood a truth he had denied since the first night he saw her at the wedding. He was not doing this for heirs. Not for Ashford blood or an empire that needed to continue. He was doing it for her. For Vivian. For the woman with $623 in her account and the courage to throw a plea for help through a window crack. For the eyes that looked at him not with fear, but with defiance. For 3 in the morning on the bathroom floor, and the conversation in the library when he spoke of his mother for the first time in 29 years. He loved her. The truth hit his chest, like a bullet. Dominic Ashford, the man who did not believe in love, who had been taught that emotion was weakness, had fallen in love with a woman he had kidnapped and imprisoned. And now someone had taken her from him. He punched the number into his phone, each press like a round being loaded into a magazine. On the other end, a man answered with the smugness Dominic wanted to crush. Moretti. Dominic spoke the name of his sworn enemy like a curse. "Listen, and listen well. If a single hair on her head is harmed, I will erase your entire bloodline. Not just you, your wife, your children, your grandchildren. Every person who carries the name Moretti will vanish from this earth as if they never existed. That is not a threat, that is a promise." He ended the call before Moretti could respond and turned to Marcus. "Activate everything. Every contact, every camera, every informant we have. I want to know where she is within 1 hour." The Ashford Empire began to move. Phones rang without stopping. Dominic's people scattered across the city started shifting like pieces on a vast chessboard. The police in his pocket pulled traffic footage. Street dealers who traded in information listened for every rumor. Gangs who owed Ashford favors were called in to pay their debts. 47 minutes later, Marcus's phone vibrated. He listened, nodded once, and looked at Dominic. Found her. An abandoned warehouse in Providence. 12 guards. Armed. Dominic did not hesitate for even a second. "Prep the team. 15 minutes. Sir," Marcus said cautiously. "Moretti wants to negotiate. They are asking for 20 million and control of the southern port in exchange for her." Dominic opened the wall safe where his gun collection was kept. He chose a 9mm Beretta, checked the magazine, and snapped it into place with a sharp, cold click. "No negotiation," he said. His voice was calm again, but it was the calm of the storm's eye. "I want them dead. All of them." Marcus swallowed. "And Miss Serena?" Dominic paused for one beat. "His sister, his blood, the traitor. Keep her alive," he said at last. "I want to handle her myself." He walked out of the office with the gun settled in his hand, and Marcus knew that tonight, blood would be spilled. A great deal of blood. The concrete room had no windows, only a single ceiling bulb that flickered as if it might die at any moment. Vivian did not know how long she had been here. Maybe a few hours. Maybe all night. Time became meaningless when you were sealed inside 4 gray walls that smelled of mildew and old machine oil. They had untied her after they arrived, probably because they knew she could not run anywhere. The steel door was thick, and there were at least 2 guards outside. She could hear them talking, their rough laughter, and now and then the ring of a phone. Vivian sat curled in the corner, both arms wrapped around her belly as if she could protect the 3 small lives inside her simply by holding them close. She counted time by her own heartbeat. 100 beats, 200 beats, 300 beats. Each thud was a reminder that she was still alive, that her babies were still alive. The voices outside grew louder. Someone was arguing. She caught fragments. Ashford called. 20 million is too cheap. That girl is worth 10 times that. She was a bargaining chip. She knew it. Her life and the lives of the 3 children inside her were pieces on a board in a game whose rules she did not understand. And she was utterly powerless. Then she heard it. Far off, like fireworks on New Year's Eve. But it was not fireworks. Gunshots. Vivian's heart began to race. The gunfire came closer. 1 shot, 2 shots. Then a burst, like hard rain. Shouting, running footsteps, glass breaking, something heavy crashing to the floor. The 2 guards outside her room started to panic. "What the hell is happening?" one of them yelled. The other did not have time to answer. There was a gunshot right outside the door, and then a dull thump, as if a body had hit the ground. Vivian pressed deeper into the corner, both hands tightening around her belly. She did not know who was out there. It could be someone coming to save her. It could be an enemy of her enemy, and that did not necessarily make them her friend. She only knew she had to protect the babies at any cost, even if that meant using her own body as a shield. The steel door blew open with a boom that sounded like thunder. Light poured in from outside, blinding after hours of darkness. Vivian raised a hand to shield her eyes, and through her fingers she saw a figure standing in the doorway, tall, broad-shouldered, a gun in his hand, smoke still curling from the barrel, a white shirt stained red with blood, and eyes the color of storm clouds sweeping the room until they found her. Dominic. He surged toward her so fast she could not even react. Dropped to his knees in front of her. His hands trembled as they touched her shoulder, her face, as if he needed proof she was real, that she was still alive. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice hoarse and breaking in a way she had never heard before. "Are the babies all right?" The babies, not the heirs, not Ashford blood, the babies, as if they were ordinary children in an ordinary family, worried over by an ordinary father. Vivian did not know when she started crying. Tears slid down her cheeks, hot and salty, and she could not stop them. She nodded because her throat had tightened so hard she could not speak. "Yes," she finally managed to whisper. "We are okay." Dominic pulled her into his arms as if she were the most precious thing he had ever touched, strong and gentle at the same time. She felt his heart hammering wildly in the chest pressed against her cheek, felt his breath burning warm in her hair, felt the way his hands held tight as if she might vanish the moment he let go. "I am sorry," he whispered into her hair, his voice falling apart in a way that broke something in her chest. "I should have protected you. I should have known. I am sorry." Vivian wanted to say it was all right, wanted to say she was fine, wanted to say he had come, and that was all that mattered. But outside the concrete room, the gunfire kept going, closer, more of it, and she heard Marcus shouting from the hallway. "More vehicles are coming, not ours." Dominic went rigid around her. He lifted his head, and his storm-gray eyes snapped from tenderness to steel in a heartbeat. He rose, pulling her up with him, one arm still holding her tight against his side, the other raising the gun into a ready stance. Tonight was not over, and hell had only just begun to open its door. Dominic pulled Vivian through the warehouse corridor, past bodies and spent shells. She did not look down. She did not want to see the faces of the people who had died because of her, whether they had been her kidnappers or her rescuers. He shielded her with his body, gun raised, eyes sweeping every dark corner like a hunting animal. Outside, the gunfire still cracked, but farther now, and Vivian saw the armored SUV waiting with its door already open. Marcus stood beside it, his face slick with sweat and dusted with gunpowder. "Get in, now." Dominic shoved her into the back seat and climbed in after her, slamming the door. The vehicle moved immediately, tires grinding over gravel as the driver hit the gas as hard as he could. Through the ballistic glass, Vivian saw Dominic's team trading shots with another group of vehicles that had just arrived, not Moretti's vehicles. She knew that even in the dim light. Moretti's were black Mercedes. These were white Range Rovers with out-of-state plates. Someone else had entered the game, and she did not know which side they were on. The ride back to the estate felt endless, even though it took 40 minutes. Dominic said nothing, one hand still gripping hers as if she might disappear the moment he let go. When the iron gates closed behind them, Vivian finally let out a breath she had been holding. She was back in the place she had once called a prison, and strangely, it was the safest place she knew right now. They took her upstairs so Dr. Park could examine her. She was the Ashford family's private physician, a Korean woman around 45, with warm hands and a gentle voice. "The 3 heartbeats are still steady," she said after the ultrasound. "The babies are healthy. You are too. You just need rest." Dominic stood in the corner of the room the entire time, his face carved from stone, but Vivian saw the way his fingers clenched into a fist every time the doctor so much as frowned for a single second. When Dr. Park left, Dominic came to the side of the bed, but did not sit. "Rest," he said shortly. "I have things to handle." He left the room before she could say anything. Vivian lay there staring at the ceiling, and she knew exactly what he had to handle. Serena. She did not know how the confrontation between brother and sister unfolded. She only heard pieces afterward from Mrs. Brennan, who brought her food with eyes red as if she had been crying. Dominic did not kill his sister. That was the only thing Vivian knew for certain. But what he did was probably worse than death for someone like Serena. He stripped her of everything, her assets, her identity, her access to any of the Ashford family's money. He exiled her to somewhere no one knew, made her invisible in the world she had once belonged to. "You are blood," Vivian heard Dominic had told Serena before they took her away. "But touch her one more time, and blood will not save you." That night, Dominic returned to Vivian's room. He looked exhausted, the lines of his face sharper under the yellow light, the dark circles beneath his eyes deep as bruises. He sat in the chair beside her bed, and Marcus came in behind him with a folder in his hand. "The report on the reinforcements at the warehouse," Marcus said, his voice tight. "They were not Moretti's." Dominic looked up. "Then who were they?" "Unidentified," Marcus said, glancing at Vivian as if weighing whether he should speak in front of her. "But they had inside information. They knew exactly where Moretti was holding Miss Cole. They knew our plan. They even knew the convoy route." Vivian watched Dominic as Marcus spoke, and she saw something she never expected to see. Fear. Only a flicker. Only 1 second. But she saw it clearly. Something in Marcus's words had frightened the most powerful man she had ever known. Dominic signaled for Marcus to leave. When there were only 2 of them in the room, Vivian spoke. "Who?" she asked. "Who could know all of that?" Dominic did not look at her, his eyes fixed on the wall across from him as if he were staring through it, into a past he had tried to bury. "Someone I thought was dead," he said slowly. "Or at least, I hoped so." "Who?" she asked again. Silence stretched out. 1 breath, 2 breaths, 3 breaths, each second heavy as a century. "My mother," Dominic finally said, and the way he formed the words, as if they were bitter on his tongue, as if they were an ancient curse he did not dare speak aloud, made Vivian understand that the ghost from his past was waking up, and this time, it wanted blood. 1 week after the kidnapping, Vivian woke up and realized she was not afraid anymore. Not because the danger was gone. She knew it was still there, lurking somewhere beyond these stone walls, but because she was too exhausted to be afraid, and maybe because she was not alone anymore. That evening, Dominic appeared at her door with an unexpected offer. "Are you hungry?" he asked, and there was something different in his voice, softer, closer. "The chef is on leave, and I do not trust what anyone else cooks." She followed him down to the kitchen, a place she had never been allowed to step foot in during her time here. It was an industrial kitchen with a granite island and every modern appliance you could imagine, but tonight it looked almost cozy under the mellow yellow lights. Dominic opened the refrigerator and began pulling out ingredients as if this were something he did every day. "You know how to cook?" Vivian asked, unable to hide her surprise. He shrugged. "I had to learn when I was young. My father believed a man should not depend on anyone for basic needs." They made pasta with a simple tomato sauce, and as they worked, they talked. Not about the empire or enemies or ghosts from the past. About small, ordinary things. The things 2 ordinary people would talk about when they were still getting to know each other. Dominic asked what kind of movies she liked. Vivian told him she had grown up on Disney cartoons because they were the only thing her mother allowed her to watch before she died. He was quiet for a moment, then admitted, "I have never watched cartoons." Vivian almost dropped the plate in her hands. "Never. As in, not once in your entire life." He shook his head, and something like embarrassment flickered across the face that was usually so cold. "My father thought it was a waste of time. And after he died, I did not have anyone left to watch them with." Vivian laughed. The sound came out of her without warning, bright and real. The first laugh since she had walked into that clinic 6 weeks ago, with $623 and a decision she thought would change her life. And it had changed it, just not in the way she had imagined. After dinner, they walked in the garden under the moonlight. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of jasmine and the soft rush of water from the fountain. They stopped beside it. The moon reflected on the surface in shifting ribbons of silver. "I do not want you here because you are afraid anymore," Dominic said, his voice low and sincere. "I know I can't change how this began, but I want you to stay because you want to, not because you have to." He turned to look at her, and in the moonlight, those storm-steel eyes were gentler than she had ever seen them. He leaned down, slowly, giving her time to pull back if she wanted to, but she did not. His kiss was careful, asking permission, waiting. Not like the kiss on the night of the wedding, drunk on desire and blind hunger. This was the kiss of a man trying to do things the right way, even when he did not know what the right way was. Vivian kissed him back. And in that moment, beneath the moon beside the fountain, she forgot she was a prisoner and he was her jailer. They were only 2 people searching for something in each other. She returned to her room with her lips still warm and her heart beating too fast. But it all vanished when she saw the envelope on the bed. A white envelope. No stamp. No address. Someone had placed it in her room while she was gone. Vivian's hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a photograph. Her ultrasound image, taken right here in this estate by Dr. Park. And beneath it, letters cut from a newspaper and pasted into a crooked, chilling line. Those children belong to Ashford, not you. Vivian trembled. Not from fear for herself, from fear for the 3 heartbeats inside her. Someone in this house wanted to hurt her. Someone who could access her room. Someone who knew about the babies. She wanted to run to Dominic, wanted to shove the envelope into his hands and let him protect her the way he had in the warehouse. But this message had come from inside the mansion. Who? A servant, a guard, or someone she had never even met. She looked around the luxurious room with its silk sheets and velvet curtains, and for the first time, the golden cage felt like a coffin. Vivian could not sleep that night. She lay staring at the envelope on the bedside table as if it were a venomous snake that might strike at any moment. When dawn began to pale behind the curtains, she made her decision. She had to tell Dominic. Even if someone inside this house was the enemy, he was still the only one who could protect her. She found him in his office, bent over a stack of papers with a cup of coffee gone cold beside him. He looked up when she entered, and something in his eyes softened for the briefest moment before the familiar mask returned. "What is it?" he asked, rising. Vivian did not speak. She only held out the envelope. Dominic opened it, stared at the ultrasound photo, and the crooked line of pasted letters. His expression did not change, but Vivian saw the way his jaw tightened, the way his fingers went white where they gripped the edge of the paper. "Where did you find this?" "On my bed," Vivian said. "Last night, when I came back to my room." Silence held for several seconds, and then Dominic turned and pressed the call button on his desk. Marcus appeared almost immediately, as if he had been waiting just outside. "Double security," Dominic ordered, his voice flat in a way that was more frightening than shouting. "Check every camera. I want to know who entered Miss Cole's room last night. And Marcus, contact our people in the city. I need to know every movement she makes." Marcus nodded once and vanished. Vivian looked at Dominic. "Her?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "My mother," Dominic said, his voice bitter as poison. "She is here, in the city, and she has started making moves." At that exact moment, the desk phone rang. Dominic picked it up, listened for a few seconds, and Vivian watched the color drain from his face until it turned corpse pale. He did not speak. He only set the receiver down and looked at her with an expression she had never seen before. Part fear, part fury, and part like a 7-year-old boy still waiting for his mother at the window. "She is here," he said. At the gate. There was no time to prepare, no time to plan. Victoria Ashford walked into the mansion as if she still owned it, as if 29 years of absence had been nothing more than a long vacation. She appeared in the doorway of the office with 2 men behind her, both of them staring down the barrels of Marcus's guns and the guards at his side. But Victoria did not flinch. Victoria Ashford was 61, yet time seemed to have stepped aside for her. Silver hair swept into an elegant twist, a face sharp as a razor, and gray eyes like Dominic's, but far colder. She wore a perfectly tailored black suit and a string of pearls, as if she were arriving for a society dinner instead of trespassing into the territory of the son she had abandoned almost 3 decades ago. "Son," she said, and her voice was sweet as honey laid over poison. "It has been far too long." Dominic rose and moved to stand between Victoria and Vivian, an instinctive motion Vivian doubted he even realized he was making. "You are not allowed here," he said. "I am your mother," Victoria replied, lifting an eyebrow as if Dominic's words were a bad joke. "I have every right." "You were never my mother," Dominic said, and Vivian heard the 7-year-old in his voice, the child who had waited and never been met. A mother does not leave her child. "You left." Victoria was not shaken. Her gaze slid past Dominic's shoulder and settled on Vivian, measuring her from head to toe as if she were inspecting merchandise. "So this is the girl with no family, no money, no status," she said, each word a blade against Vivian's skin. "A one-night accident carrying my heirs. I must say, you have terrible taste, Dominic." Vivian wanted to answer, wanted to say something sharp and strong, but her throat was dry, and she could only stand there with a hand over her belly, enduring the woman's appraisal. "Get out of my house," Dominic said, his voice trembling with the effort of restraint. Victoria laughed, and the sound was like breaking glass, sharp and dangerous. "Your house," she repeated, the sarcasm velvet smooth. "Everything you have came from your father, this empire, this mansion, this power, and your father," she added, looking straight at Vivian, taught me an important lesson. Heirs matter more than anything, even their mother. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the marble floor like a countdown. Her men followed, and Marcus escorted them back toward the gate, but Victoria's threat remained in the air like toxic smoke. Heirs matter more than anything, even their mother. Vivian held her belly tighter, where 3 small heartbeats kept pulsing, and for the first time she truly understood what she was facing. 3 days after the confrontation in the office, Dominic tightened security until Vivian felt as if she could not breathe. Guards stood at every corner of the halls, at every entrance, even outside the windows of her room. He did not allow her to leave the estate, did not allow her to be alone for long, and whenever he had to go anywhere, Marcus stayed at her side like a shadow. But today was the exception. There was an emergency at the port, something involving a shipment being stopped and 2 of Dominic's men being taken in. He did not want to go. Vivian could see it in the way he hesitated at the door, in the way he looked at her as if he were trying to memorize every line of her face. But the Empire could not wait, and in the end he left with Marcus, after posting 4 guards inside the house. Vivian was in the library, searching for peace among towering shelves and the familiar scent of old paper. Her belly was much larger at 15 weeks, a clear curve beneath her loose dress. 3 small lives were growing day by day, turning her body into their home. She was reading an old novel when the air in the room changed. There was no sound, no warning, but Vivian knew she was not alone. She looked up and saw Victoria standing between 2 bookcases like a ghost stepping out of shadow. Vivian started to call for the guards, but Victoria lifted a hand. "Do not bother," she said with a cold smile. "My men have taken care of them. They are not dead, only sleeping for a while. I only want to talk." Vivian rose, her hand gripping the chair, her body taut as a wire ready to run even though she knew there was nowhere to run. Victoria moved closer, her heels tapping softly on the wooden floor, and stopped a few steps away. "Do you know why I left?" she asked, as if she were beginning an ordinary conversation between 2 women. "Because Ashford men do not know how to love. They only know how to possess. My husband possessed me like a decoration, and when I was no longer useful, when I could not give him more children, he tossed me aside like garbage." Vivian said nothing. She stood still, forcing her face into calm while her heart beat like a war drum. Victoria tilted her head, studying her with the eyes of a predator savoring fear. "Dominic is more like his father than he thinks," she went on. Her voice like poison poured slowly into Vivian's ear. "He will crush you, the way his father crushed me. You think he loves you?" She gave a short, contemptuous laugh. "He does not love you. He only loves the children inside you, the heirs. That is all Ashford men care about." Those words cut into Vivian like a blade, finding the deepest fears she had tried to hide from herself. But she did not let them drown her. She had survived too much to be defeated by words. "What do you want?" Vivian asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "I want to save you," Victoria said as if offering a favor. "Give me the children when they are born. Then disappear. I will give you money, a new identity, a new life anywhere you want. You will be free. Free of Dominic, free of this empire, free of the golden cage that holds you." Vivian looked at the woman in front of her, the woman who had abandoned her 7-year-old son and vanished for 29 years, now standing here offering Vivian the chance to do the same. Something rose in Vivian's chest, hot and fierce. Not fear, rage. "I am not afraid of you," Vivian said, and she was startled to hear her own voice hold steady. "I am not afraid of Dominic, and I will not abandon my children. Not to you, not to anyone." Victoria lifted her eyebrows, genuinely surprised by the resistance. Then she laughed, the sound cold and echoing through the quiet library. "You will regret it," she said. "They all say that at first." She turned toward the door, but paused at the threshold and looked back at Vivian one last time. "You know I left when Dominic was 7, but do you know why I came back?" Vivian did not answer. "For the heir," Victoria said, her gaze dropping to Vivian's belly. "Back then, the heir was Dominic. I returned to demand custody, to control the heir of the Ashford Empire. But my husband stopped me." She fell silent for one beat. "Now the heirs are those children, and I will never let an heir slip away from me." Again, the door closed behind her. Vivian stood alone in the silent library, her hand resting over her belly where 3 small heartbeats kept pulsing, and she knew with bone-deep certainty that Victoria was not making empty threats. She would do anything to get those children, even kill their mother. Vivian told Dominic about the encounter with Victoria the moment he returned. She saw fury flare in his eyes, saw the way his teeth ground together and his fists clenched until his knuckles went white. He wanted to go after Victoria immediately, wanted to end everything the way Ashford men usually did. But Vivian took his hand and asked him to stay. "Tonight," she said. "Just tonight. We will figure out what to do tomorrow." He stayed. They ate dinner together in her room, talking about things that had nothing to do with Victoria or the Empire or danger. Then he kissed her forehead and left when the clock struck 11, so she could sleep, promising there would be guards watching all night. Vivian drifted off with a false sense of safety. She did not know that at that very moment, somewhere in the mansion, one of the guards was opening a back door for intruders. She did not know that Victoria had bought someone on the inside weeks ago, placing her pieces, waiting for the perfect moment. She did not know that tonight was the night Victoria decided to act. 2 a.m. Vivian woke to a small sound, something like fabric brushing against fabric in the dark. She lay still, eyes closed, forcing herself to listen. Her heart began to beat faster when she realized someone was in the room. Not Dominic, because he would have said her name. Not a servant, because they were not allowed in at night. Someone else. Someone who should not be here. She opened her eyes and saw 2 dark shapes moving toward her bed. Vivian screamed, the sound ripping the night apart, and rolled off the mattress just as a shot snapped through the air. Not a loud blast, but the dry, choked cough of a silenced gun, and she heard the bullet tear into the pillow where her head had been. She hit the floor and crawled toward the door while the attackers came after her. The darkness was friend and enemy at once, hiding her and blinding her at the same time. She slammed into the corner of a table, pain flashing bright, but she kept moving because stopping meant dying. The second bullet drove into her arm. The third tore through her right shoulder. Vivian collapsed, her scream dying in her throat as pain exploded like fire. Warm blood spilled out, soaking her nightgown, dripping onto the wooden floor. She tried to rise, but her legs would not obey. The world began to blur at the edges. 3 heartbeats, she thought in panic. Her children, she had to live for them. More gunfire cracked, this time from the doorway. A man shouted. Bodies collided. Something heavy fell. Vivian no longer knew what was happening. She only knew she was lying in her own blood and the world was going dark. Marcus. She heard someone call his name from very far away. Call the doctor. Call Dominic. God, there is so much blood. Someone pressed hard against her shoulder, trying to stop the bleeding. It hurt. It hurt so much she wanted to scream, but she had no strength left. Then there were running footsteps, a door slamming into a wall, and a voice she would have recognized even standing at the edge of death. Vivian, no, 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 Dominic. He dropped to his knees beside her, his hands shaking as he touched her face. She saw him through the fog of fading awareness, saw those storm-gray eyes filled with tears. Dominic Ashford was crying. The man who had not cried since he was a 7-year-old child waiting for his mother at the window now had tears streaming down his cheeks like rain. You can't leave me, he said, his voice breaking into a million pieces. Do you hear me? You can't die. Vivian wanted to say she was all right, wanted to say do not cry, wanted to say she was not going anywhere. But her lips would not move, and the darkness was pulling her deeper. Doctor, Dominic shouted, and his voice was no longer the voice of a powerful boss, but the desperate cry of a man about to lose everything. Call the doctor now. He gathered her into his arms, not caring that blood was soaking through his shirt, not caring about anything but the woman slipping away against his chest. 3 heartbeats. He did not know if they were still beating. He did not know if the children he had never met were alive, or dying along with the fragile hope he had only just learned how to feel. Do not die, he whispered into her hair, his mouth trembling as he kissed her forehead. Do not die, Vivian. I have not had the chance to tell you I love you. Her eyes closed. Her hand fell limp at her side. And Dominic Ashford, the man who made an entire city tremble, the man who ruled an underground empire with an iron hand, knelt on a blood-soaked floor and prayed for the first time in 29 years. He prayed to any power that might be listening, begging it not to take her from him, begging for more time, begging for the chance to tell her he loved her, because he did love her. He loved her so much he could burn the whole world if she did not wake, and he would do it. He would turn to ash everyone who had caused this. But first, she had to live. They took Vivian to the surgical room inside the estate, where Dr. Park had already set up everything she would need. Dominic did not want to risk bringing her to a public hospital, did not want to explain gunshot wounds to the police, did not want to be away from her for even 1 second. He followed the gurney until he was stopped at the operating room door. You can't come in, Dr. Park said, her voice firm even though her hands were shaking. Let me work. The door closed in his face. Dominic stood there, staring at the blank white door as if willpower alone could let him see through it. As if he could watch Vivian lying on the table with 2 bullets in her body and 3 small lives inside her. Her blood was still on his hands, on his shirt, on his face where he had kissed her forehead, red and warm and drying into dark brown. Marcus came to stand beside him. "Sir, you should change," he said quietly. "I can bring you clean clothes." "No." Dominic did not look at him. "I am not going anywhere." The first hour passed in suffocating silence. Dominic stood as still as stone, eyes fixed on the operating room door, not moving even an inch. Marcus remained a few steps away, saying nothing, simply there like the loyal shadow that had followed Dominic for 15 years. Nurses came and went now and then, but no one said anything about Vivian's condition. In the second hour, Dominic's false calm began to crack. He started pacing like a caged animal, heavy steps striking the marble floor. Then, without warning, he slammed his fist into the wall. Once, twice, 3 times, until plaster flew, and the blood from his hand mixed with Vivian's drying blood on his skin. Marcus did not stop him. He understood there were some pains that had to be released. And this was how Dominic faced the helplessness he had never been forced to endure. In the third hour, Dominic sank down onto the floor, back against the wall, head bowed into his hands. He was not crying anymore, the tears long since drained away. There was only emptiness now, and the most primitive fear of all, the fear of losing the person you love. He thought of the wedding night, of the girl with the bright smile and the clear laughter among champagne bubbles. He thought of the way she had looked at him, as if he were ordinary, not a monster, not a mafia boss. He thought of 3 in the morning on the bathroom floor, and the conversation in the library. He thought of the kiss beside the fountain under the moon. He had never told her he loved her, not once, and now it might be too late. The operating room door opened, and Dr. Park stepped out. She was still in surgical scrubs, her face tired but not hopeless, and Dominic saw something in her eyes that let him dare to hope. He got to his feet, legs shaking so hard he nearly stumbled, and moved toward her. "She is going to make it," Dr. Park said, and Dominic felt air flood his lungs as if he had just broken the surface after drowning. The bullets missed anything vital. "She lost a lot of blood, but she will recover, and—" Dominic swallowed, afraid to ask but unable not to. "And the babies. 3 heartbeats." Dr. Park answered with a small smile, still beating. "All 3 are fine. They are strong babies, like their mother." Dominic did not know when he started crying again. He only knew the tears were running down his face, falling onto the marble floor, and he did nothing to stop them. He had been strong for 29 years. He had built a shell of steel around his heart ever since his mother left. But tonight, that shell had shattered, and he was only a man who had nearly lost the woman he loved and the 3 children not yet born. Marcus turned his face away, giving him space. Others in the corridor quietly withdrew as well, leaving Dominic Ashford alone with his tears and his relief. But the relief did not last. When the tears dried, when his heartbeat steadied, something else took its place. Coldness, ruthlessness, blood hunger. "Who did this?" Dominic asked, his voice returning to the terrifying calm of a mafia boss. "Victoria's people," Marcus said. "We caught one alive. He told us everything." "Where is my mother?" Dominic asked. "Still in the city, waiting to hear how it turned out." Dominic straightened. Vivian's blood had dried stiff on his hands, on his shirt. His eyes were red from crying, but hard as steel. "Bring her here, to the basement." Marcus hesitated for one beat. "Sir, she is your mother." Dominic looked at him with eyes stripped of all feeling. "She tried to kill the woman I love. She tried to kill my children." He spoke each word as clearly as a death sentence being read aloud. "She is not my mother anymore." The basement of the Ashford estate was a place few people knew existed, and even fewer ever left after they stepped inside. The concrete walls were a meter thick, with no windows, no sound from the outside world able to seep through. This was where Dominic's father had handled problems that could not be solved with money or threats. And tonight, Dominic stood here, facing the woman who had given birth to him, bound to a wooden chair in the middle of the empty room. Victoria Ashford looked far less elegant than she had the last time Vivian saw her. Her hair had come loose, her expensive suit was rumpled, and her string of pearls had been confiscated along with everything else on her person. But her gray eyes were still arrogant as ever, still looking at Dominic as if she sat on a throne instead of being tied like a criminal. "You do not dare do anything to me," she said when Dominic walked in, her voice still heavy with confidence. "I am your mother, your blood. The whole world will know if you lay a hand on me." Dominic did not answer at once. He pulled another chair over, set it in front of her, and sat down. The distance between them was only a few steps, yet as wide as an abyss. He stared at this woman, searching for something familiar, something that could be called a mother's love, but he found nothing except strangeness and the old pain that had turned to stone in his chest. "You abandoned me when I was 7, he said, his voice strangely calm. "You promised you would come back. You said you were leaving for only 1 week." Victoria said nothing, but Dominic saw something shift in her eyes. "I waited for you," he went on, and his voice began to tremble even as he tried to hold it steady. "Every day, for 1 year, every afternoon when a car passed through the gate, I thought it was you. Every time the phone rang, I ran to it hoping to hear your voice. I refused to believe you had truly left. I thought something must have stopped you. I thought you still loved me." He paused, swallowing something bitter lodged in his throat. "Did you know that? Did you know I waited for you every day, and you still did not come?" Victoria stayed silent. For the first time in Dominic's memory, this woman had nothing to say. No explanation, no excuse, no apology. Only a silence as heavy as a gravestone pressing down on whatever was left of the bond between mother and son. Dominic stood. He could kill her right now. No one would stop him. No one would judge him. Marcus was outside the door, ready to carry out any order. Dominic could end it all with a bullet, with a knife, in any way he wanted, but he did not. "I will not give you death," he said, and he saw a flicker of surprise cross Victoria's face. "That would be a release. That would be the easy way, and you do not deserve easy." He stepped closer, looking straight into her eyes. "I will strip you of everything. Money, identity, access to any resources of the Ashford family. You will be taken to a small town in Montana, where no one knows who you are, where no one cares who you used to be." Victoria went pale, and for the first time Dominic saw real fear in her eyes. "No," she said. "You can't do that." "I can," Dominic replied. "And I will. You will live. But you will live with nothing. Alone. No one beside you. No one who cares. No one who remembers." He turned and walked toward the door. "The way you left me to grow up," he said. He called Marcus in and gave a short order. "Take her away. Make sure she can never come back." As they dragged Victoria from the chair, she began to scream. "You will regret this." Her voice echoed through the dark basement like the howl of a cursed soul. "You need me. You will realize you need me. You!" The steel door slammed shut, cutting the screaming off in the middle. Silence. Dominic stood alone in the dark basement, surrounded by shadow and the damp smell of old concrete. He breathed in deep, feeling the cold air fill his lungs, and for the first time in 29 years, the 7-year-old child inside him finally stopped waiting for his mother to return. Vivian woke slowly, as if rising from the bottom of a dark ocean. Soft light slipped through the half-drawn curtains, and she realized she was lying in the familiar bedroom with silk sheets and velvet drapes. Her right shoulder ached with every breath, carefully bandaged beneath a clean nightgown someone had changed her into. Her body felt heavy as stone and fragile as thread, but she was alive. The 3 small heartbeats were still beating inside her. She could feel them, faint but stubborn, tiny fighters who had battled to survive alongside their mother. She turned her head and saw Dominic sitting in the chair beside the bed. He looked like hell. Unshaven stubble darkened his jaw. Deep shadows pooled beneath his eyes, and his clothes were rumpled as if he had worn them for days without changing. His eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep, or from crying, or both. When he saw her open her eyes, something in that exhausted face flared to life, like a flame rising from ash. "You are awake," he said, his voice rough as if it had not been used in days. "How long?" Vivian asked, startled by how weak her own voice sounded. 3 days, he answered. "You slept for 3 days. Dr. Park said your body needed time to recover." 3 days. And looking at Dominic, Vivian knew he had been sitting here through all of them, not leaving, not sleeping, only waiting for her to come back. They were silent for a while, neither of them sure what to say. Then Dominic stood, walked to the window, and stopped there with his back to her. His shoulders were tight, and she saw his hand clenched at his side. "You can go," he said, and for a moment Vivian thought she had misheard. "What?" "You can go," he repeated, still not turning around. "I have prepared everything. An apartment anywhere you want. New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, or a small town no one knows by name. Money enough to raise 3 children until they are grown. And more than that. A discreet security team will keep you safe for the rest of your life, and you will never even know they are there." Vivian did not understand. Her mind was still fogged by pain medicine and exhaustion, and what Dominic was saying did not make sense. "Why?" she asked. Dominic finally turned, and she saw tears on his cheeks, bright in the faint morning light. "Because I brought you here," he said, his voice shaking. "I kept you here. I did not give you a choice. From the first day, you were my prisoner. Not because you wanted to be, but because I forced it." He came closer, dropped to his knees beside her bed, and took her hand in his trembling hands. "But now you have a choice," he said, looking into her eyes with all the honesty a man like him could gather. "You deserve to decide your own life. Not me, not anyone else. Only you." Vivian looked at him, the man who had taken her from the clinic, locked her inside this estate, and dragged her life onto a path she never chose. And now he was kneeling beside her with tears on his face, offering her the thing he feared most, the possibility that she would leave. "I will not force you to stay anymore," Dominic went on, and every word sounded like it had been dragged up from deep in his chest with visible pain. "But if you want to stay, if you choose this, choose me." He hesitated, as if he were betting everything on what came next. "I will spend my whole life earning that choice. I will learn how to love the right way. I will be the man you and the children need. I promise." Vivian felt her throat tighten. She thought of the old apartment, of $623 and $4,800 of debt. She thought of the lonely life she had lived for 11 years since her aunt threw her out. She thought of a sister who had forgotten she existed. Then she thought of 3 a.m. on the bathroom floor, of the conversation in the library, of the kiss beside the fountain, of the man who had killed to save her, who had cried when he thought he was losing her, who had sat beside her bed for 3 days without eating or sleeping. "Give me time," she said at last. "To think," Dominic nodded. He lifted a hand, hesitated for a beat, then gently brushed her cheek. "As long as you need, I will wait." He rose and moved toward the door. His posture looked heavy, as if he carried the whole world on his shoulders, like a man who had placed his heart in someone else's hands and was waiting for it to be crushed. The door closed behind him. Vivian lay in the faint morning light, one hand resting on her belly where 3 small heartbeats continued to pulse. And she knew this was the biggest choice of her life. 2 days had passed since Dominic made his offer. 2 days she lay in bed, healing and wrestling with the biggest decision of her life. Her shoulder still hurt, but much less now, and Dr. Park said she could walk as long as she was careful. Today, Vivian sat by the window, looking out at Boston far away on the horizon. The tall buildings glittered under the late afternoon sun, and she thought about the life waiting out there if she chose to leave. A new apartment anywhere she wanted, money enough to never worry again, safety, normalcy, and loneliness. She thought about her old place with the leaky faucet and the thin walls, about nights lying alone, listening to the neighbors argue, about simple meals eaten in silence, about feeling invisible inside a city of millions. She had lived that way for 11 years, and she could keep living that way with 3 children beside her, safe, normal, alone. Then she thought about Dominic, about the night he sat beside her on the bathroom floor at 3 a.m, holding a cold cloth to her neck and saying nothing, about the conversation in the library, when he spoke of the 7-year-old boy waiting for his mother at the window, about the way he looked at the ultrasound screen with awe in his eyes, as if he were witnessing a miracle, about the nights he read to her belly, his low, warm voice filling the dark, reading business books because he did not know what else to read, and she laughed until tears streamed down her face, about the kiss beside the fountain under moonlight, gentle and asking and waiting, about the way his hand held hers for 3 days while she lay unconscious, not eating, not sleeping, only waiting for her to wake. She thought about 2 abandoned children. His mother left when he was 7. Her parents died when she was 16, and her aunt threw her out when she was 18. They both grew up not knowing what family was, not knowing what unconditional love felt like. They both built walls around their hearts so they would never be hurt again, and they both let those walls fall in front of each other. Maybe that was why they found each other. Maybe that was why she could not imagine life without him anymore. Maybe 2 abandoned children could build a family together, a family neither of them had ever had. Vivian stood. The decision had been made, maybe long before she admitted it, maybe back on that bathroom floor at 3 a.m, or in the garden kiss, or in the moment she saw him crying beside her bed. She did not know exactly when she had fallen in love with him. She only knew that she had. She found Dominic in his office, but he was not working. He sat behind the desk staring into nothing, like a defendant waiting for judgment. When she walked in, he looked up, and she saw hope and fear braided together in those storm-gray eyes. Vivian stepped in front of him. He rose, and she could see him holding himself tight, bracing for the possibility she would say goodbye. She lifted her hand and took his face, feeling the rough stubble under her palm and the warmth of his skin. "I choose you," she said, and saw his eyes widen, saw his breath catch. "I choose the danger and the empire and this complicated life. I choose the sleepless nights of worry, the enemies watching from the dark, and everything that comes with loving you." She drew him closer until their foreheads touched, their breath mingling. "I choose you, Dominic, not because you are safe, but because you are mine." Dominic held her as if she were everything he had ever lost and had just found again. Strong and desperate and gentle, all at once. She felt his body trembling, felt his tears fall into her hair, felt his heart hammering like a war drum against her. "Forever?" he asked, his voice shaking like a child begging for a promise it barely dared to believe. "Forever," she answered, and in the dark room with its oak walls and the ghosts of the past, 2 abandoned children finally found home. The pain came at 3 a.m, 4 weeks earlier than expected. Vivian woke with a strangled cry trapped in her throat as the first contraction tore through her body like a tidal wave. Dominic woke instantly, his hand finding her in the dark, his voice still rough with sleep but already sharp with alarm. "It is time," she whispered through the pain. "They are coming. The babies are coming." 18 hours. 18 hours of pain and fear and hope braided together. Dr. Park and the medical team worked without stopping, while Vivian fought through each contraction, her body crossing limits she never believed she could survive. By the 14th hour, the monitor began to sound. One of the 3 heartbeats was weakening. Dr. Park ordered an emergency surgery team to be ready if it became necessary. And Dominic, the man who made an entire city tremble, knelt beside Vivian's bed with his face gone white, and his hands shaking as he gripped her hand like a lifeline. "You are the strongest person I know," he whispered into her ear when she wanted to give up. "Our children need their mother. I need you. You can do this. I believe in you." Vivian locked onto those storm-gray eyes, onto that voice, and she pushed. She pushed through the pain, through exhaustion, through fear. She pushed for the 3 small lives depending on her. The first cry ripped through the air in the 16th hour. Lucas, their first son, arrived with an outraged wail, as if protesting being forced out of warmth. 12 minutes later came Nathan, the second boy, quieter, but with eyes wide open, looking around as if trying to understand this new world. And finally, after 2 more hours of complications that held everyone's breath, Isabella arrived, their youngest, the smallest of the 3, but with the loudest cry, as if announcing her presence to the entire universe. Dominic cried. Tears ran down his face without shame as he held each child in turn, his calloused fingers trembling when they touched bodies so tiny and fragile they did not seem real. "Perfect," he whispered, his voice breaking. "They are perfect. You are perfect. Everything is perfect." 6 months later, the nursery in the Ashford estate was a riot of color and chaos. Toys lay scattered across the rug like little bombs that had already exploded. Clean diapers and dirty diapers sat in messy piles. Bottles turned up in every place you could imagine. And in the middle of all that disorder, Dominic Ashford, the underground king whose name made the East Coast shake, was lying on his back on the carpet making animal noises. Isabella sat on his stomach, shrieking with laughter every time he pretended to trumpet like an elephant. Lucas was trying to climb onto his chest as if it were a mountain meant to be conquered. Nathan was perfectly content to gnaw on Dominic's finger, drool soaking the hand that had once killed without blinking. Vivian stood in the doorway with a cup of cold coffee in her hand, and her heart felt so full she thought it might crack open. This was a life she never dared to dream. This was a family she never believed she deserved. This was the happiness she had fought for, and nearly died for. That night, after the 3 babies were asleep in their white cribs, Dominic found her in the bedroom. He looked at her with an expression she had learned to read. Love and reverence, and something like worry. He stepped closer, and she saw he was hiding something in the pocket of his suit jacket. "Would you?" he began, and she saw his hand tremble as he drew out a small black velvet box. "Yes," Vivian said before he could finish. He stood there, the box still unopened, eyes wide. "I have not asked the whole question." She came closer, took the box from his hand, opened it, and saw a diamond ring glittering like a star in the night. "I do not need to hear the whole question," she said, smiling at him. "The answer is yes, always yes." Dominic slid the ring onto her finger, then kissed her with all the love a man like him could give, and Vivian closed her eyes and let herself sink into the moment, pressing it into every cell of her body so she would never forget it. That night, when the mansion fell asleep, Vivian lay beside Dominic and remembered everything. She remembered the clinic waiting room with fluorescent lights buzzing like dying insects. She remembered $623 in her account and $4,800 of credit card debt pressing down on her shoulders. She remembered the decision she believed was the most sensible choice for a woman who could not afford to raise herself, let alone 3 children. She went to that clinic that day to end something. Instead, she found a beginning. The beginning of the wildest journey of her life. The beginning of a love she never thought she deserved. The beginning of a family she had always ached for but never dared to hope for. She had been kidnapped, locked away, threatened. She had been betrayed, shot, nearly killed. She had cried more than she ever had in her life, but she had also been loved, protected, cherished, chosen. She turned her head and looked at Dominic sleeping beside her, his face peaceful in a way she only ever saw when he was with her and the babies. This man had given her everything, not money or power or the luxury of this mansion, but a family, a place to belong, a home. She laid her hand on his chest, felt the steady beat beneath her palm, and she knew with absolute certainty that she would do it all again. Every pain, every fear, every tear. She would do it again without hesitation if it led her here, because this was where she belonged. With him, with Lucas, Nathan, and Isabella, forever and always. This story teaches us that life never follows the plan. Sometimes the hardest beginnings lead to the most beautiful endings. Sometimes the most wounded people have the deepest capacity to love. And sometimes, family is not blood, but the people who choose to stand by you in your darkest hours. If this story touched your heart, please hit the like button and share it with anyone who needs to believe in unexpected love. Do not forget to subscribe to our channel so you do not miss more moving stories every day. How did this story make you feel? Have you ever lived through a hard beginning that later became the best thing in your life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We truly want to hear what is in the deepest part of your heart. We wish everyone watching this video good health, a joyful life, and days filled with peace. Thank you for listening. Goodbye, and we will see you in the next video.